Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be ranking Harry Potter books from my least favorite to my favorite. Disclaimer, this list is subject to change at literally the drop of a hat. I think that my arrangement changes pretty much yearly, so second part of the disclaimer, these are just my opinions. Feel free to disagree. In fact, it's a good thing if you disagree. If you have a different ranking, I would love to hear it in the comments below. But let's do this thing. My least favorite is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Now, before anybody gets really bent out of shape, it used to be one of my favorites in the series, especially when I first started reading the series. There were only 3 books out, I think, at that time. And I love Chamber of Secrets. I felt like it was actually my favorite. As time has gone on and rereading it as an adult, to me it feels like it just doesn't fit as cohesively with the other books. So it's not necessarily that it's a bad book or that I don't like it, but when I put it in the context of the completed series, it feels a little bit less cohesive in tone and a little bit more separate from the other books. Things I like about it are that we get a little bit more backstory on Tom Riddle's days at school and Hagrid's backstory a little bit more. At the time I loved it, but in retrospect, in the context of the rest of the series, it just falls a little bit flat for me. And I don't know if a lot of other people feel this way. I think that there has been a shift away from it. I'd imagine for a lot of people it's their least favorite book, but you know, one of them had to be number 7. And for me, it's Chamber of Secrets. Number 6 on the list is Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. I actually felt like this was a pretty good way to tie up the series as a whole, but that epilogue, it was so bad. I can overlook a lot of the kind of clumsier ways that certain aspects were tied up. I can overlook that the Battle of Hogwarts actually, in the scheme of things, had a much lower death toll of our favorite characters than you would imagine. I can overlook a lot of those things, but that epilogue was so corny and honestly so unnecessary. Even at the time when it first came out, I remember being like, okay, this is a pretty good ending. I'll admit, I honestly expected Harry to die in the final book, but that's fine. I thought that it made sense the way things happened, that he was sort of like a Horcrux. It made sense. But my main issue with the last book is that that epilogue it was just really corny, really unnecessary. I almost just pretend that that part of the book isn't there, and when I pretend that that's not there, then I'm good. I'm like, okay, that was fine. In the scheme of the series, it's just not one of the top tier books for me. Number 5 on this list is Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. I actually thought that this book had some really strong aspects, and I will say that I used to like it less. It's grown on me over time, and I do think that it was necessary for a lot of that Snape backstory, and I do think that it had a lot of things that were really necessary for setting up everything that goes on in book 7. Yes, it's mostly a setup book, but it does have some really essential features in it. Finding out that Snape is the Half-Blood Prince, which honestly wasn't really that surprising. It wasn't like that big of a twist, but I do feel like it was still an effective read. Something I think about this book is that in some ways it is sort of recycling the lessons from Chamber of Secrets about not trusting dark objects, dark magical objects of unknown origin, or dark books of unknown authors. And I think that it does it a little bit better in this book. Maybe just because we see it firsthand more, it's much more effective how Harry kind of gets sucked into this book. Number 4 on this list is Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or if you're British, the Philosopher's Stone. What can I say? It's the OG. It's OG Harry Potter, the book that started it all. I think about book number 1 is that it has this really special type of magic to it that completely draws you in and completely immerses you into this world that you are just endlessly fascinated by. Meeting Harry at the very beginning when he is an orphan, he's abused, he's got this horrible family, and then going with him on this really magical journey where he finds out out that not only is he a wizard, but he somehow survived this death curse that nobody else ever has, and he's famous. There's something about that that really still kind of gives me like a fluttery feeling in my heart. I don't really know how to explain it, but it's just such a great, beautiful story. It's really just one of the best children's stories, and I just think the first book will always have that really special magic of it being this new thing, this new amazing story and world to get pulled into. It's got a really special place in my heart because I remember when I first read it, and it was just this way to escape into this really cool place. It's the OG. It's the OG Harry Potter. Number 3 on this list is actually also book 3, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I really liked this book because it expands a lot on the Hogwarts scenario. You know, you find out about Hogsmeade, and it also just expands on the world in general a little bit more. You learn more about the wizarding world, you learn about Azkaban, you learn even more about like the wizarding governments, and I think that every time you get that step deeper into the world, it just pushes you further in and it makes it that much more immersive. So I really liked book 3 for this reason. I also think that as the trio enters their teenage years, the tone begins to change a little bit in this book. It really changes in the next book, but this book is just a little bit darker, and I feel like that's a little bit different from Sorcerer's Stone and Chamber of Secrets, where you had these endings that still felt like everything was okay in the end, like everything got wrapped up. And at the end of book 3, you know, Pettigrew gets away and you're like, wait a second, things didn't get wrapped up in a neat little bow. We didn't get our justice. Sirius still has to live on the run. Yes, he's free, but he still has to be in hiding. So I think this was the first book where it was kind of like, things aren't always gonna wrap up neatly in this story. And I feel like that was just a really big shift in tone. Not necessarily a bad one though. I think it brings them to that deeper storyline. I also love that we meet Professor Lupin in this book, and we get to learn a lot more about Harry's parents and their time at Hogwarts and his dad's friend group. I really like those aspects because, again, it just pushes you deeper into the mythology of this world, deeper into everything that's going on in this world. To be honest, Prisoner of Azkaban for a long time was number 1 on my list, but I feel like as more books came into the series, where it sat just shifted a little bit for me. It's still really good and I still really like the storyline, but it's not the first one I want to go revisit when I'm deciding to reread a book. And I feel like that's kind of an important metric for me to consider just for my personal taste. Number 2 on my list is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. What's really funny about this book is I used to not like this book as much. When I first read it, I remember I liked the story and I really liked what was happening with the Order of the Phoenix, but I was frustrated with Harry as a character, and I think part of that was that I was young when I first read it, and then when I read it again, I remember kind of realizing at the end of the 4th book, Harry went through and witnessed something that was really so traumatic. So the way he was acting in the Order of the Phoenix made a lot more sense when he realized just a few months prior, he watched a friend and classmate die in front of him. He went through a really traumatic experience. As an adult, or when I got older, I was really understanding in how Harry was acting and how Harry was feeling. It makes complete sense to me now. I like this book a lot because I think it has a lot of deeper themes too, and a lot of metaphors, and of course historical comparisons that you can draw. There's this overreaching government and a denial of something that's happening. Like, you can just draw so many parallels, modern or historical, and I feel like that makes for a very realistic feeling story, even though it's clearly fiction and it's clearly like it's about a wizarding world, but those elements make it feel more tangible. I feel like that is just the mark of a really good book, when you're fully immersed and it feels very real, even though it's obviously fiction. I loved finding out more about the Ministry of Magic and how wizard government works and all of those components, as well as the idea of this secret society of students learning magic, learning defensive magic. I loved that. That was so cool. All of those components I appreciate more and more as I get older within that story. My number one favorite Harry Potter book at the moment is Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire is just chef's kiss. Such a good story. Now, this is, in my opinion, probably the real turning point in the series, where this book just gets dark. I forgot how scary this book is, and I recently reread it. This book is a decidedly darker tone. In my opinion, it's the real turning point in the series, and I think it was intended that way. It's from front to end, probably the scariest book and definitely one of the darkest. It starts off with that chapter with the Muggle caretaker. That is just one of the scariest chapters. I think that's the scariest chapter in the entire series for me. I don't know why. It really gets me. But then, of course, the way the book ends is also really, really dark. And then, of course, all the events of the 5th book where nobody believes him. The PTSD that this kid must have. I like this book not only because it's a darker tone and it really kicks off the rest of the story and gets it moving in high gear. I also really like that we get to see all of this international wizard culture and like having a big sporting event. I think those are just fun things to be able to see in this world. We've got the Triwizard Tournament, and we get to see what these other schools look like and how other schools and other parts of the world operate within this magical world. And I feel like that is one of those moments where this just becomes such a bigger universe, and it expands so much on the mythology and the history and all of the components that you're really interested in. For me, this book is just great. It's that darker tone, it's scary, it's packed with action, it's got all these interesting new things you get to learn about the world. I loved it. I just loved it. At the moment, it's my favorite. Honestly though, this list gets shuffled around more than a deck of cards at a casino. So I feel like it's definitely subject to change, but this is the most stable it's been for a while. I think that's pretty much it for this video. Definitely please let me know down below what your personal ranking is for Harry Potter books. I will see you later.